Hello once again on the Daily Jace live show. Hope everyone is doing as well as can be. Happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm very excited for our next guest. He's the co-founder of Johnson Corner, Adnan Belushi. Welcome to the show. How are
Thank
you,
you for
mate?
having me. I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm excited to have you on because you always have a special, unique view on business and entrepreneurship and where we want to go moving forward. And also, your story is pretty wicked and your background. So, before we dive into everything, for the people who may not know you, give the quick five of what you're all about and how you came to be here.
Oh yeah, okay, sure. So I'm originally from the Emirates, born and raised there. Grew up in a world where, we were just didn't have access to the basic social infrastructure, right to citizenship and all of that sort of stuff. And so I was really motivated at a young age to have a better life and go and create that myself and get out there. And so that really made me really interested in the human systems that we create that end up excluding people from it. So that gave me a massive passion into humanity. How can we progress humanity? So I've always had a humanity-centric mindset, whether it was in business, whether a project that I worked on. So moved to New Zealand. Long story short, I've been here for 10 years now, and I have 2 years ago got into entrepreneurship, started my own company, which is Johnson Corner. And we do a combination of workspace memberships, enterprise growth programs, and training programs as well, focus on innovation and everything around that. The idea for us is obviously build a global company, build New Zealand's first co-working brand, so to speak, around the world, the network of them in the next 20 years is a 20-year vision. And activate that. And the mission really is to create a sustainable world of work, which simply means that if we transition the jobs we've got in many industries into sustainable jobs, which is Industry 4.0, renewable energy, then we'll have a better world. So that's a little bit about me.
Nice one. And how's the brain been over the past 2 months? If everything's been flipped upside down and inside out, and the rules have seemed to go out the window, how's it been in your world?
Yeah, it's been a great opportunity to reset. I think we somehow end up being part of the big simulation of the world that's created, and we are running in many different races. Some we don't control, some we do. So it's been a great opportunity to reset, understand the purpose. I love creating visions, things that I want to activate, realize in the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years. So I've had a great opportunity to think about some new ideas, new visions that I want to implement sometime in the future. So that's been really good, exciting, fun. I've really enjoyed spending time with my kids and with my wife as well. So it's been really good time to just relax and an opportunity to reset the business, go back to our core purpose and grow from there. So it's been really good fun. I've loved it.
Awesome. What on that day that the Prime Minister made the announcement that we're going into lockdown, what was the first thing that went through your mind?
I'm a problem solver, so I was really interested. Is this the way to go? Is this the solution? And I was really interested in looking at other countries. Obviously, in Asia, they've been dealing with this 2 months in advance than us, so they were ahead of us. And I was quite interested in the Sweden model. Interested in Elon Musk had a very opposite view of the lockdown is the wrong way to go. So I was really fascinated by what he had to say. So if you're interested, you should definitely check out his Joe Rogan podcast. So
Yeah, I just saw it, actually.
I'm always interested in alternative ways and problem solving. Is this going to work? And in the end of it as well, I kept track on, what are the learnings out of this and what we learned. And my biggest concern has been, ensuring that we don't abandon capitalism, but we make it better, which means we increase the size of the pie and we divide it better instead of getting back into a socialist based model. And we have to look into history and see how things have evolved and why we've made certain decisions to get to where we are, to be able to ensure we don't allow, or we look into making the right decisions instead of seeing a rise of populism or socialism, Trump, Brexit, all of that stuff. So it's been interesting, that announcement, and I have really enjoyed using my problem-solving mind to get involved and see what's going on.
Awesome. So by sounds of it, you've seen what's been going on all over the world. If you could choose one country that is doing that has given a really good response to this whole thing, what would you say that country was, and why?
I think it's I haven't yet got to a conclusion because it's very early. But at the moment, my money is on New Zealand and Taiwan. Those countries, and I think I'm quite interested in the Australian model. They've kind of kept the economy open a little bit, so I'm interested in the risk modeling, where they've taken a little bit more risk. I'm interested in the Sweden model. Obviously, it looks pretty bad because they've had a 30% death rate compared to other countries. But what does it look like from a long-term perspective? So it's very interesting to see. Also, when you have a crisis, everything comes on the surface. Everything is transparent, and people get to have a view to see where your values lie, where your priorities are, and whether you're, let's keep the economy going. We have, debts anyway, so let's just don't lose that, or let's save lives. So it's been very interesting, entertaining to see different countries, different values, different approaches. So at the moment, I think I quite like the New Zealand and the Taiwanese approach to things, to tackling this crisis. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I haven't heard much out of Taiwan. What are they doing over there?
Very similar to New Zealand, I think. Go hard, go early sort of approach. I haven't followed up on any of that. I've plugged off from that world for the last 2 weeks to get back into the business world.
Fair enough.
But I'm hearing a lot of good news, and so countries that go hard, go early may have the opportunity to create bubbles amongst themselves to open up tourism and trade and business activity. So I think that'll be very interesting to see.
For sure. Moving into your world a little bit, what's been the biggest challenge through this time for you personally?
It's just sort of being content and leading with empathy, and not, challenging that business mind. Business is for profit. But at a crisis, it's all about community. We're a business where community is a key driver of the value that we create. So, for example, we've done things like we've asked all members not to pay. We've given them 100% relief of membership. We have supported them where, a few of them, they came back to New Zealand and had to be quarantined. So we made sure that they were looked after. Dropping packages or just contacting them and speaking to them. So that's been a challenge, to rise to ensure that your customers are looked after, your neighbors are looked after, your family is good. Lots of Zoom sessions. And that's been, I think, the big challenge is, rising up to the challenge as a leader and ensure that we look after our customers and not treat it as business as usual, because it wasn't.
Yeah, for sure. It's that idea of community over commerce. It's I think that there'll be a lot of companies out there that, well, everyone's struggling through this thing. No business hasn't been unaffected by it. Certain sectors have been affected more or less, but in general, everyone's feeling it. Everyone needs to think, how do we get through this collectively unscathed? And it's a joint effort, and I totally agree with you that we've got to lead with empathy. How has, just so that everyone knows the journey over the last 2 years, you've been building up Johnson Corner. What was it? What was the vision at the start, and how has it grown over 2 years? And what has it been through over the COVID-19 situation? And and how has that changed the thinking around it?
Yeah, so we started in Taranaki. We were a group of entrepreneurs who felt that we could help Taranaki's economy transition into a sustainable economy. In Taranaki, just a bit of background, we have oil and gas and big sectors that obviously are going through a transition. There's a new strategy in place that has been put together by local EV and councils. So for us, we were quite interested in how can we build an innovation economy for the region. And part of that is technology. How do we export technology? How do we increase startup activity? How do we increase innovation activity within big organizations and startups? So we were quite interested in that. And the focus was Taranaki as a region. To create a space within the space we could activate a community and ecosystem and facilitate that, and that will drive a lot of outcomes. So that was the initial idea, and we started that, and we've been doing really well in that space. Then business has grown into providing enterprise growth solutions. So working with local enterprises and helping them innovate, create new solutions, look into near-term opportunities, but also look into transforming their business to be driven by growth has been a big thing. Change can happen for three reasons. Once by crisis, once by a direction from the top saying there's a new strategy to go towards. The third is by growth. So if you're growing, you have no choice but to change. So we always believe that growth is the way to be led, to lead an organization to change. So we've been bringing that mindset in a lot of enterprises. So that's how we've got to 2020. Before the crisis was quite an exciting year for us because we were going to grow, we're going to add new people in the business. And we were projecting growth in the next 5 years based on the rate of transformation that was taking place in the business world in Taranaki and around the world. Okay, so the rate of transformation for us was about 9%. So what the crisis has done, the crisis has taken us 5 years into the future within 3 months. Remote working, everybody's been forced to work remotely. Distribution teams, everybody doesn't have to be in satellite offices. Trust model has changed. Managing staff face to face has gone into making sure that they're productive at home. So for us, we've relooked at our strategy and gone, well, the world's moved 5 years into the future. So how can we move our strategy 5 years into the future? So we've put a lot of thinking around that, and an outcome of that has been a 3-month strategy to execute and unlock near-term opportunities. And from there, we will have a clear picture of what does the next 6 months look like. And the key trick is to how do we ensure we're making the right decisions so we can end up at a sustainable long-term path to activate the strategy and our mission. So that has been a challenge. But in the end of the day, we're going to also take high risks, try some new things as well, and it's okay to fail on those as well.
Right. So everything's been compressed, and you've had to take these leaps that you were going to in the next 5 years very quickly, or that's generally the trend of the ecosystem. Have people been, I suppose, has their thinking been more optimized towards entrepreneurship and business and heading into this new normal because of how they've had to adapt, do you think?
I think so. In our ecosystem, that's what we're hearing. That's what we're feeling. Everybody is excited to think about how do they redesign their existing core business by unlocking near-term opportunities, and how do they start working on new opportunities, and where do they go? And one of the things I always say is that think about it. You are at a train station, okay, and this train will never come back again in the next 75 years. Okay, so this is your golden ticket. Are you going to jump on it, or are you going to stay on the station? If you're going to stay on the station, it means you've decided to go back to business as usual and do what you were doing before. If you're going to jump on the train, then this train is in 16 to 18-month window. Okay, so you've got that window to innovate now, to access funding as much as possible and access all the cheap money that's out there to innovate, create new solutions. And when the economies around the world start to recover, which is end of 2021, and business travel recovers in 2023, then you have a mature, tested, commercialized solution, something new that you've never thought of before COVID-19, that can take more market share, bring more revenue into your business, grow your business. So that's the message that I keep giving, and it seems to be receiving really well. And I think the more we activate and incentivize programs where we increase privatization through entrepreneurship, then I think we're better off. Looking at the history is the same thing. The crash usually has a 10-year cycle to recover. The first 3 years is all accounting and numbers and borrowing and debt. And the next 7 years is ingenuity, building new things, creativity, and entrepreneurship, whether it's done in existing businesses or starting new businesses. But that's the pattern.
It's interesting. I was actually on a podcast the other day. It wasn't my podcast, but I heard that as countries go through a crisis, or as government makes policy changes and the boat gets rocked a little bit, it can cause a lot of businesses to become liquidated or go out of business, and so the private sector actually gets smaller, and the public sector needs to take over those functions in society. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we see that shift happening now. You know, if we look around and we see who's spending money, it's government, right? But I think here is where the challenge lies with policymakers, to ensure that efficient policies in place, that we incentivize productivity, incentivize in a fair system, that private sector also has a way to be involved in using the money available by government to stimulate much more of a private movement, instead of it turning into government constantly stimulating. Because if we don't do that, then we have to look at the impacts of productivity, impacts of increasing the standard of living. We can't eat money. So we've got to incentivize somebody to produce something, and we've got to incentivize somebody to buy something, to consume it. So I like to refer to Ray Dalio, and he's been quite fascinating to follow. He's writing a new book called Changing World Order, and it's all about looking at history and the decisions that we've made, and how can policymakers make efficient decisions. So I think the stimulation from the government has to be, temporary, but they have to think really, really hard. How do they incentivize and encourage and collaborate better with private sector? It's, for me, it's early stage to see where it's happening, but I am also hearing that a lot of new startups are setting up new businesses to take advantage of new budget, for new budget available to improve privatization. For example, 12,000 new jobs in the new budget for the environment sector. Okay, so are those all jobs are going to be filled by government agencies? I doubt it. And will there be new startups, new people setting up to actually win some of those contracts from government to provide as a private sector? Absolutely, it's going to happen. So 80,000 New Zealanders have come back home. What are they going to be doing? So, some of them will retain their jobs, work remotely. Some of them will go back. Some of them will start new businesses in New Zealand. So yeah, it's early stages, but I do think that let's not abandon capitalism, but let's increase the size of the pie by incentivizing privatization, and then be good at dividing that better.
Yeah, very true. There's yeah, the budget came out the other day, and there's going to be $50 billion circulating because of it in the economy. So obviously they'll be distributed in certain ways to different sectors, but there will be that money for New Zealanders. Obviously the government can't do that in every budget that they produce, but at least it gets the economy going so that it can become sustainable for itself. What excites you the most about this new normal?
Look, I've lived all my life in crisis mode, removing myself, uplifting myself from poverty, coming to New Zealand, setting up in a new world, then getting to the startup world where, you never know when it's all gonna just disappear. So what excites me most is the level of uncertainty and unpredictability in the system, because what that is forcing to do is us to be creative. So before I had to actually push a lot to get people in a state of mind where they use the creativity, the creative ability to engage in creativity. Now, because there's so much unpredictability in the system, everybody's creative. If everybody's creative, everybody's entrepreneurial. If everybody's entrepreneurial, they're building new things. If they're building new things, that's great. So I'm really excited about that. And one of the things that, I've been pushing really hard on the mission of, creating sustainable jobs is, how do we stop people going into these industries that are becoming redundant, or they don't add any positive value to the society, and have more people go into these new sustainable jobs and industries. For example, I grew up in one of the richest oil production country in the world. But growing up in school and going to university there, I was constantly told, you're not going to work in the oil and gas industry because it's dying. You need to go into these new areas. So as a result, I have built skills that are relevant for the future, for the 21st century. So it's ironic that I ended up in New Zealand, in the base of where oil and gas is produced, coming from a country where, I was in the world of oil and gas, but I was never incentivized or encouraged to enter that industry. So I'm really excited about that, is this acceleration into sustainable jobs, sustainable learning, and the appetite for creativity, appetite for, building ecosystems, programs, incentivizing a new world order is something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I always think people should have 3 hobbies: finance, fitness, and fabricate. One to keep you fit, one to make you money, and one to keep you creative. It's like that creativity stream is so important, especially as we head into these times when the boat is shaking a little bit. It's super important.
Yeah, it's interesting because interesting you said finance. You should watch the Elon Musk podcast with Joe Rogan, where he made news that people should stop going into finance and law and go into building things. Because if you do that, then you become an entrepreneur, and then you have a stake into your in a company, and there's nothing wrong in building a $1 billion company. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, what I meant by that is people should have 3 hobbies. One to make you money. So it doesn't mean you have to go into the finance sector.
Yes.
3 hobbies: finance, fitness, fabricate. They're the 3 things that you need. But I did watch that podcast, and it's very interesting what Elon Musk said about everything. If you haven't checked it out, jump on YouTube and see it. What I suppose, when you talk about creativity and entrepreneurship, it takes a certain mind shift or a mindset to think in that way. Obviously, you've been doing it all your life. You've come from like you say, from poverty and built your life up, and you're always thinking creatively and problem solving. What would you say to the people who haven't always had that mindset or didn't grow up in that way, and maybe they've been made redundant, they have to think on their feet and they have to actually adapt and innovate in their own lives in order to get by? What do they need to think about, or how do they need to think now that they have to move forward?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to acknowledge that stability and certainty is an illusion that we have created. You know, I hear it all the time. People say, "Oh, I had to go get a job because I wanted some stability." I think that's an illusion. So I always sort of say, "Hey, you need to find a way to be comfortable with the not knowing." That's the most important lesson that we don't learn. The school system doesn't teach us. So the most important thing is to know how to deal with the not knowing. Okay. Once you find those tools and understand how to deal with it, then you become a totally different person. Now, if you're looking for something to go to help you with that, is a book called Principles by Ray Dalio. And I live my life based on certain principles. I'm a very principles-driven person, and I lead with radical transparency. I work with people where there are meaningful relationships. Nothing is transactional. It is part of my Arabic culture, very similar to Maori culture. We think long-term relationships are not transactional. And also, you know, listening to what feels right as well within you, the feeling, listening back to yourself. So I think that's the key message is if you want to find comfort, then you have to find some principles and tools that will allow you to be comfortable with the not knowing. Now, if you're a leader in an organization and you want to inject entrepreneurial ways of doing things to your team so you can build new things and create new solutions, then I ask that you look at a book called The Startup Way by Eric Ries. Eric Ries wrote the book called The Lean Startup. And when he did that, he sort of created this blueprint of the Silicon Valley way of, you know, start doing lean, creating startups using a framework he called Lean Startup. And then he was hired by companies like Toyota and GE to bring lean startup thinking in large organizations. So then he wrote the book, The Startup Way, is how do you take entrepreneurial startup mindsets and tools and mechanism and frameworks and apply it in a large organization. So I think those are the two things. If you want to find comfort within yourselves and be confident about a world where you know how to handle unpredictability and not knowing, then look into Principles, Ray Dalio. If you want to look into it in a business sense, you've got a big business and you want to inject more entrepreneurial culture, then look into The Startup Way, Eric Ries.
Nice one. Yeah, I need to pick up those books. I've heard about Principles. It's a very famous book that I haven't got around to yet, but I've heard good things about it, and also The Startup Way. What do you think is going to happen 5 years down the track globally? What would, if you had to make a top 2 or 3 predictions, what do you think the world will look like?
That's a really, 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 really important question, because the life that you are living today is because of the decisions you made 3 to 5 years ago. So think about
Very
it.
True.
If you connect the dots, the decisions you made 5 to 3 years ago has created the life that you're breathing today, you're living today, like it or not. So a lot of the leaders I hear to are saying, don't think about, don't think anything ahead of 6 months. And I think that's not right. So you've got to be thinking about what does life look like in 3 to 5 years for you, and plan those incremental changes today so it takes you down that path. Um, so I think firstly, it's really important to think about what does life look like in 3 to 5 years, and I think that it's going to look very different to what we're seeing now, and every single element of life is going to be disrupted and changed. From public infrastructure, from technology, blockchain, 5G, electric cars, hydrogen, nuclear fusion technology. So there's going to be such a different world we're living in, and people are going to feel the recession, and they're going to be very creative as to how they architect that world. So I think, but the key thing is to not try to picture and paint what it's going to look like, but be comfortable with how the moving parts are shuffling around, and scan those moving parts every 3 months and make some changes and execute them within 3 months. And so have that discipline, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. Eventually, you'll end up in that 5-year future that is right for you. So that's how I'm approaching it.
If you had $1 trillion, let's say, what kind of future would you want to build for the world? Or an infinite amount of money? How would you? I guess this crisis is a little bit like a reset, and so what would you want to see implemented?
Yeah, look, for me, I'm interested in 2 areas of life. One is people who are at the bottom of the chain. How do we not give them more money, trickle down money, but how do we uplift them through entrepreneurship? Okay. Privatization is so powerful to uplift people from poverty. I'm quite passionate about that because that's been my life. And the second element is I'm quite fascinated and passionate about advancing humanity into different planets, into increasing the capacity of human beings. I'm fascinated by brain-machine technology. I'm fascinated by bringing back community-based living instead of living in a model where buy your first house, go up the ladder, sell it, buy you another house. So how do we bring sustainable community living that is integrated using technology? Think about building a community with 3D printed house that are built within 48 hours, a house, excluding the plumbing and everything and the roof and everything. Tesla roofs. The roofs are connected to each other, where energy is exchanged through a community system. Schools are within those communities where everybody goes and learns together as a community. So I'm quite fascinated by that. I would definitely invest into doing something like that. So again, I'm passionate about investing into solutions that uplift people from poverty through entrepreneurship or privatization. And the other element is how do I keep pushing the human race forward, whether increasing their capacity, bringing back community and meaning and purpose in life, or living on different planets.
Nate, we definitely need to find a way to bring people together. People will be craving connection through all this. I know there's people who are sitting at home. They may have been alone during lockdown, so that community aspect definitely needs to be in there, and just advancing the human race on the whole. I think that's a really good message that you touched on there. What do you see as the biggest hurdle for the next year for New Zealand, do you think?
Well, there is, 2 challenges. One is the health challenge. One is the economic challenge. So we've got to be comfortable in living in a pre-vaccine world and a post-vaccine world. So in the health challenge, everybody will be making changes to adapt in a pre-vaccine world. And, we might have a spike, drop down again. We might go into lockdown, very possible. if we open up bubbles quickly without having a vaccine, then we're increasing risk of an outbreak. So we have to be comfortable with living in that world where it's going to be a series of W's when it comes to recovery in the health, and same with economic as well. The better we do in the health, the better the economic recovery confidence is going to be injected in there. If not, then we're borrowing more. And we can look into those scenarios that the Treasury has created. If anybody's interested, they've done 7 scenarios based on, what does it look like if we go back into lockdown in September for a month, because of an outbreak. And the next year, the challenge is going to be investing into that health crisis, and also looking into how is all this economic thing going to play out. Politics is internal. Are we going to look after oneself? Are we going to look after each other? Are we going to distribute everything fairly? Are we going to incentivize the right things? And that's all about efficient policy design. And also, how does politics going to work internationally, which is going to be very fascinating, right? And what are the pressure points? Are we going to see price increase, trade tariffs? Who's going to pay all the debts that we're borrowing? How does that connect reserve currencies into each other? Trade, a world order shift from US to China. What does that look like? So it's very interesting. So for New Zealand, is the health crisis and also the economic crisis. It's going to be, all I can say, it's going to be very complex.
Yeah, it's interesting you touched on politics there, because obviously we've got an election this year. It seems that politics has been put onto the shelf for the moment just to deal with the health crisis at the moment. But as we get closer and closer to election day, there will be heavier campaigning, and more things will come to the forefront politically, and how we'll economically rebuild. So it's a very interesting area, and I think this will be an election.
It is. I just like to add,
we've heard before.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things we have seen in history, when we have a massive crisis or a crash, we also see revolutions come through. So it'll be interesting to see from this political journey, what does that revolution look like? And I think I'm quite excited about the rise of the Maori people. The way they've collaborated for the first time, sort of stood on their own foot and realized that, yes, there is a place for activism and pushing tribalism and the Treaty of Waitangi, but also there is an opportunity as iwi around New Zealand to collaborate as one, because they all care about land and people, so values are the same. So interesting to see how much will there be an economic development agency for Maori only, and how much of the Maori will invest into entrepreneurial privatization and more resources into looking after the Maori as an IP. So I think I'm quite fascinated by that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point you brought up there. The revolution side, I suppose we're seeing it globally. There's been countries that government is struggling to deal with the public impact that this crisis is having, and the public are at the doorsteps of different governments around the world on how they're dealing with it. It's an interesting point you brought up with Maori. They could come together, and this could really strengthen their voice. I know there's going to be a lot more lobbying from all areas, because everyone is struggling. Everyone needs a piece of the pie to resource their sector. I think it's really brought a lot of people out of the shadows that didn't have a voice before, and they're starting to speak up about what's important to them. So yeah, like I said, it will be a very, very interesting election coming up. It's one to watch, that's for sure. Just as we sum up, do you have anything else to say to the viewers? Any closing remarks to say to anyone who's watching out there?
Yeah, look, I just want to say this is the greatest opportunity of all time, not for us, but also taking responsibility for the future generations, because these sort of debts are going to be paid for generations and our children as come through. So, think long term, not short term. Only invest, take high risks, do the right thing, work on things that make a positive impact on humanity, whether it's at the top or the bottom of the chain. Again, increase the pie, divide it better, get involved. You have two choices. You can either build the world of tomorrow by engaging, or you can live in a world built by somebody else. So make a choice and get involved. And you can certainly know which box I'm sitting in. So that's all I have to say.
Awesome, Adnan. If people want to find out more and get in touch with you, what's the best place to do that?
So it's johnsoncorner.nz. It's the website. You can have a look in there. We are currently operating in Taranaki, but we have plans to expand around New Zealand and also Asia. We have been working on that for a long time. Get in touch. We are having conversations with investors, businesses, landlords that are looking to work with us. That's the best place to get in touch with us.
Awesome, Adnan. Thank you so much. You're a super intelligent guy. Interesting story that you have, and you always bring amazing insights to the table. So thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Have a lovely day. It's so lovely to speak with you, and let's catch up sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck with Johnson Corner. We'll catch you soon.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
See ya. Adnan Belushi, everyone. He's one to watch. He's had his trials and tribulations, that's for sure. He's grown up in poverty, moved to New Zealand. Amazing story. If anyone wants to hear more, check out his TED Talk. It's super interesting, and he's going places, that man. That's all from me for today. As you might have noticed, the Daily Jace is going a little bit slower at the moment. Main reason is because I'm a student and I got exams coming up. So I've been rocking and rolling into those, but I will be posting every so often on all my socials. So check them out. And when we go live, you'll hear from me and the guests shortly. So that's all from me for today. Have a good one, everyone. Happy Tuesday, and hope you have a great week. Peace.